Hello and welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast, Series 3. Last year, we spoke to SDRs, BDRs, and people earlier on in their sales careers about their journeys, tips, and why people should get into the industry. This year, we'll be speaking with sales and business leaders about their journeys, how they've made their success, and their insights into sales as an industry, especially what needs to be done to change the perception of sales. I'm Lizzie.
I'm Kyle, and still for far too long, people have just been falling into sales. Through this podcast and by having conversations with industry leaders, we're looking to continue to change the perception of sales and make it a career of choice.
On this episode of the podcast, we are joined by Avi Mirriam Cole, Global SDR Manager of Infogrid, a business using technology to make every pudding healthy, efficient and sustainable. We talk with her about her journey in sales from a BDR to a Global SDR Manager, her perception of the industry before she got into it, and any advice she would give to someone wanting to follow down the same route. We also discuss her thoughts on women in the sales industry and why more women should get into sales. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to this episode of the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast series, and today we are joined by Avi Mirriam Cole. Avi, thank you very much for joining us today.
Of course, yeah, no worries at all. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. And to kick things off then, Avi, if you could just start by giving us a brief introduction into a bit about yourself and the company you work for, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm Avi Cole. I've been in the industry, maybe like 7 years now. I'm currently at a company called Infogrid. So Infogrid is kind of an end-to-end solution that provides support, and our mission is to make buildings healthier, places to work and visit, more efficient to kind of manage and maintain, and more sustainable to run. So we basically deploy sensor technology across buildings and estates, and then apply kind of the latest AI technology or artificial intelligence and machine learning to create kind of actionable insights online on our platform for kind of building management. And that's kind of what my company does at the moment. That's kind of like an elevator pitch there. Hopefully my SDRs are proud of that. And yeah, that's kind of me.
I'm sure they will be.
That's kind of me, really. Fun fact, I recently got married, so my last name just recently changed. So I got married in August. So I've been married for like 2 months.
Massive congratulations. Massive congratulations, Avi. And thank you for the introduction. I love the beginning of that as well. You said 6, 7. When you've been in sales for that long, you kind of just lose track of how quick the time is going. But really appreciate the introduction. And what we always like to do on the podcast is just start from the beginning, really. And particularly as someone that studied, was it international relations and national security, I believe it was.
Yeah.
How and why did you even get into sales in the first place?
I was like warrior, wanted to save the world, right, while I was at uni. Like, that's why I went to uni, that's why I did the degree that I did. And I originally wanted to go into the UN and kind of help the world and be like WHO's one only field person, working in the field, helping people out, etc. With pandemics, which is funny thinking now back on it. And I went and I just was like, this is not really for me, because I'm quite a bubbly person, energetic person, and it's very kind of proper and corporate. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to fit in here. I don't know if this is going to be right for me. And I kind of accidentally fell into sales. I got like a really good recruiter and then accidentally fell into sales, and then I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved sales. I didn't really think I was going to be good at it. When I got my first sales job, my dad was so scared. My dad was like, I don't know about this. He'd done sales previously, but yeah, super kind of apprehensive about me entering the world of sales. So I kind of accidentally fell into this world that I'm kind of made a massive career out of, and it's been super successful.
Brilliant. Nice one. And I'm not necessarily glad that you fell into sales, because that's the whole reason that we're doing this podcast.
Yes,
but the reason we're doing it is because too many people fall into sales. So I know you mentioned then you kind of fell into it, but where were you first introduced to it? Because I know it wasn't of your radar. Obviously, your dad had worked in sales as well. But at what point were you first introduced to the industry?
I think for me it was, a couple of friends were in sales, and they were doing really, really well, like lots of money coming out of, and they were a year above me at school, so they had already gone into the world of sales, and so hearing their kind of, their successes and being like, it's really great, I'm earning loads of money, I've just come out, like I'm renting this really massive flat in London. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that and be really successful. And I was just like, okay, great. This sounds potentially like a good career. And that's what I mean about like peripherally. Yeah, peripherally. I'd heard about it through kind of my friends. Yeah, and they were really enjoying it. And that's kind of where I kind of got introduced to it.
Brilliant. Nice one. And one thing I want to go back to, you actually mentioned your dad had worked in sales, but he was apprehensive maybe about your decision to go into the industry. Why do you think that was?
I think my dad was apprehensive about me entering it because of the perception and him working in sales. It was a lads club, right? It was very much, the Wolf of Wall Street kind of perception. He still had that because he worked in it. It was very much a male dominated industry. When he worked in it, there were no women. There were 0 women in that industry. And so when I said, yeah, I've got a job in sales, he was like, oh my God, she's in for like a shock, or, I don't want my daughter going into a sales environment, which is very kind of macho bravado, kind of lad culture. So I think he was very apprehensive about me going into that world because of that.
Such an interesting point, and I'm not going to take too much of this part, because I know Lizzie's going to cover women in sales later on in the conversation, because it's such an important topic. But coming back to you, Avi, like what was the main reason? I guess you kind of went against your dad's advice, because most people are guided by their parents when it comes to career choices. You almost did the opposite, really. So what was kind of the motivation behind that itself?
I've always been a rebel, I guess you could say. I think I've probably been quite headstrong quite a lot of the time. And if I made a decision about something, it was come hell or high water, I was going to do it. Like nobody could stop me. That kind of mentality of this is my choice. I've always been like that. My parents would probably be like, they're probably listening to this because I know that I told them I was coming on this. But yeah, they'll be like, yep, that is completely Abby. Like she's just, she's in her own, beats her own drum basically, and to the beat of her own drum is what she goes by.
Interesting. Well, if you're listening, Avi's parents, I'm sure they'll be happy at the career in sales that you've had now. Who knows? To be fair, your dad might have been doing that all along, saying don't go into sales, knowing that you were going to rebel and go into it anyway.
Yeah, more than likely. More than likely.
Yeah, it was absolutely the plan all along. But you've obviously been in sales now for a number of years. From your experience in the businesses you've been at and the industries you've worked in, how much of that perception maybe that your dad had or you had before going into it, do you think what was actually true, or how much of it was just completely make believe from your own personal experiences?
100% of it, I would say. I know that because every single kind of person has that perception going into sales, I think, and it's just not. I mean, there are a couple out there probably in the ether, but I think sales has just come such a long way from where it used to be, but I feel like it's this perception of sales has been kind of left back in the day. It's not moved forward at all in any sense. And I think specifically with sales now, going into it and actually going through it and making a career out of it, like 100% of it has been smashed. Like, it's not a lads it's not a lads club anymore. It's it's definitely not, you don't have to pick up the phone and do $150 a day. Like, there's no support. You're on your own. It's KPI driven. It's work hard, play hard. Like none of that, all of that is now smashed. Like I highly disagree with that that is the perception, and that's why I'm here, right? It's like that is 100% not true. I came into it thinking, oh my god, what am I doing? And then I went into it and I was like, oh, I don't understand why people have this. I feel like, yeah, this perception hasn't been changed for years.
I know it's interesting, isn't it? Because sales has changed, but actually the opinions that people have as an outsider looking in hasn't changed at all. And again, basically the reason why we're looking to do this podcast, it just doesn't seem to make any sense as to why the perception hasn't yet changed. And we're looking to obviously get more people into the industry. Just want to, before we touch on that a little bit more, I want to go back probably to the beginning, but I always like to ask, can you remember your first ever sale or meeting booked in your sales career?
Oh my god.
Really testing you now.
Yeah, it's been a while. I do remember one, but it's not my first meeting booked, which is funny because it's one of the ones that I worked the hardest on, and it's like stuck with me. And it's probably one of the ones that I had the most adversity with and had to fight for. I remember my first one. I've just remembered my first one. It was.
Please share it with us.
Oh my god! So, I got on the phone, and it was just like a regular cold call, and I just started chatting with this woman. And prior to that, I was trying to like sell like other people. Like I'd never really found my style, and for some reason on this one call, I was just like, you know what, I just can't be bothered because it's just taking so much effort, and I'm working against the grain here. Let me just pick up the phone and have a chat with someone because that's what I do. And I spoke to her and we started to speak, and it was like summer holidays, I think. So Q3 probably. And I could hear the kids in the background, and she was a freelancer. And I was like, is that the kids in the background? And this is way before the pandemic. And she was like, yeah, they're driving me insane. I was like, oh, babes, you need like a glass of wine, don't you? She's like, I need a bottle. I was like, okay, let's do this, right? Let's get together, have a bottle of wine, leave the kids at home, and we could talk about, and at the time it was Signal AI. Let's talk about Signal and how we can help you, transform your communications. And she was like, yeah, I'm so up for that. And like booked the meeting straight away. And I remember the AE that I booked it for was like sat behind me. And he turned around, and he's one of the like highest bookers. Shout out to Jacob Flaxman. He turned around to me and went, Av, did you just book a meeting with a mate? Like, who were you talking to? Because I was just so kind of chilled out on the phone. I was like leaning back on my chair as well. And I was just like, yeah, we're just going to go grab a drink and we're going to, and I was like, do you want to come with us? Because I've booked it in for you. And he was like, yeah, all right. I was like, that was like the first time that I kind of cottoned on to leaning into your strengths and leaning into kind of what you do naturally is what the best thing to do is. Working against the grain actually works against you. And like trying to, because I was trying to sell like him, and I was trying to like be really proper, really straight to the point and blunt, and I'm not that person. And so I was like, oh my god, I've been doing sales wrong. And but up until that point, I was finding it really hard. And then I lent into my strengths, and what I call it is a superpower, and like, know your superpower. My superpower is rapport, right? It's rapport building. So I lent into it. And from that moment on, sales was like, that's how it came to me. And it was just very easy. And I was like, oh my God, I've missed a trick.
I love that. I completely agree. I think like in sales, obviously you need structure, you need processes, you need all of that in place. But actually just a bit of personality and authenticity can really go a long way. And how can you found your superpower through that first meeting that you booked? But how can other salespeople then find out what or unlock their superpower?
I think unlocking your superpower is something very innate to an individual, like no one else has it, right? So I've had SDRs in the past that their superpower is very analytical. For example, they're in the numbers. So I'm like, use that, right? Use that to your advantage. If you're really analytical, you're numbers driven, and he like this guy was like checking the reports like hourly. So I was like, okay, you be the pace setter then, right? You go out there and you book, put the highest numbers on the board. And so he used that as his superpower. Other people were like, I just don't take any bullshit, basically. And so I was like, great, use that as your superpower, right? Go lean into it and go, okay, go on the phone, be straightforward, be really honest, and be really authentically you. And so I think it's just understanding who you are as an individual outside of sales, because I think a lot of people think you have to be a certain type of salesperson, quote unquote salesperson, to be able to sell. And it's like, no, there are so many different selling styles. Not what works for me might not work for someone else. What works for someone else might not work for the third person. And I think it's just understanding that each individual has their own selling style, and that's what makes them unique. And that's why them selling something versus someone else selling something is going to make them successful. Like using your own personality in it, I think it's super important.
Yeah, completely agree. And not only that, I think as a salesperson, you enjoy it more. You know, if you're actually being yourself and not trying to be someone you're not, you're going to enjoy the job more. And ultimately, as a result, your performance is probably going to be better anyway. So I think it's a really good point. And just, Abby, coming back onto the other meeting that you mentioned, or the other sale, which was the one that you remembered first, although it wasn't the one that was the first sale. What was it about that made that one stick out in your mind or remember more so than the first sale or meeting booked itself?
I think for me that specific one stuck out because that was the most hurdles I had to jump over. I was selling into an industry that was kind of opposite to my personality. So I was selling into law firms, and like if you imagine a law firm and my personality, we're like juxtapositions, we're like oil and water. And there was a lot of hurdles because there was, kind of getting to the right person first of all in a massive law firm like that, that I booked in. And then also just selling it internally to my AE. I had a really brand new AE, and he wasn't as confident as he could have been. But then it was just like, this is a good opportunity, and like kind of fighting to be like, this is a really good opportunity. I've got the key stakeholders. I had to kind of almost sell it internally for someone to jump on it. And then I got all of the so I'm selling two ways basically for this particular opportunity. I'm selling it internally and externally. And I'm like, guys, this is really good opportunity. I'm selling to the client. Like, this is a really good tool. Like, you should use this. So I'm like doing a two-way thing, and just hurdling it. And I remember during the time at that time as well, I was having some personal issues because my dad was going through cancer at the time. So I've got internal, I'm selling it internally, externally, plus I'm going through this personally. So I think the hurdles that I had to jump over to get that, and then they signed. It was a closed one deal at the end of the day. It was one of the biggest law firms. It was a Magic Circle law firm. When they signed up for like 20 grand, which was like the highest I'd ever booked in. And that was like the peak of accomplishment for me in my SDR career, of where I was like that was like a tick box of, I've made it in this industry. I know where I want to go. This is a career for me. Because I fought so hard personally and professionally to get that over the line.
Interesting. I think there's something that can really be said about that for a salesperson, that actually sometimes it's the deals where, like you said, you've had to overcome adversity, or the ones that have been really difficult and challenging to get. You just get a bigger sense of accomplishment and achievement from it as well. And this wasn't something I was going to touch on, but obviously based on what you said there, obviously sorry to hear about your dad as well. But what advice would you give, or how important do you think resilience really is in sales? I guess what you've just described there is kind of the epitome, really, of what's needed. So just, I guess, share your experience of that with us.
I think, yeah, like resilience is so important, because you are just going to get knocked down quite a lot. Like I say this to every SDR that I'd like try and hire. I say it to my team. Will be one of the hardest roles you will ever do in your sales career, but it's also the most rewarding because you learn the most, you earn the most, you have loads of progression at this level. And so for me, being resilient and being knocked down, but then managing to get back up and being able to like dust yourself off and keep going, is just so important. And it just teaches you life lessons, not just lessons at work, or like how to be resilient in a professional environment. You learn a life skill, in all honesty, of like, life's not hard, life's not easy, right? Life is hard. Like, there are other stuff that goes on outside of your professional kind of environment that takes place, but you learn a life skill of how to deal with that and how to also navigate it, to be able to like, okay, great, this has not gone right, how do I, and you kind of find other avenues of like seeing like little things like, some of the stuff that I say to my team is like the little wins or silver linings of things. So you could have had a really rubbish day and then you look back and you're like, actually no, I did this, this and this. You take that outside of work and apply that to any other person, any other role. Like even at the pub, being able to just look at the day and was like, I didn't get through to 10 people today, I didn't get to any meetings, but then you're like, actually I did X amount of calls. You can translate that into your real life, like, you know. And I've done it number of times, right? Like I said, with my dad, and him going through chemo and stuff, I was like, okay, I can either sit here and kind of be like, okay, this is a really rubbish situation, and I can, but I was the one that took him to chemo, and I actually used to use that. I used to make him laugh because I was like, stop being grumpy, let's go. Like, I used to like see the kind of funny side to it a little bit, and it was just like, I used to call him like old man and stuff like that, and I used to run away from him and be like, why you not running, bro? Come on, we're late for your appointment. So like little things that it's so weird because you wouldn't really think about that kind of stuff like translating into your real life, but it does, and it affects you so much that you're like, you almost feel bulletproof. Like for me anyway, I feel like anything can be thrown at me and I'm like, I got this, I can, what's next, you know. And how am I going to navigate this? And I always try, because when you get a no continuously, you try another way. One way doesn't work, so you just try and try again. And I think that really translates into real life. Sorry, I went on like a like a proper like inspirational like you got this, guys.
Yeah, well, thank you for your TED talk there, Avi.
I
That was
know.
like an absolute TED talk. But no, but it was great, and we have kind of gone off on a couple of good tangents there. But I think but for anyone listening to this that wants a bit of a lesson in positive mindset, motivation, and overcoming adversity, I mean that is absolutely it for sure. And we spoke with another guest recently about just sales as being a life skill, like the things that it conditions and trains you for. And I think what you shared then about applying that to things outside of work is really, really useful. So no, thank you for sharing that. And then just want to go back to I guess the original topic one, which was all around the perception of sales. And I know prior to this we spoke about when introducing yourself as a salesperson, they're always like I'm in sales, but then a disclaimer. Oh, but I'm not sleazy. Or but I'm not one of them. And that's something I think a lot of people do. But now you've been in sales, we're quite good at articulating what our old perception of a salesperson was. Sleazy, Wolf of Wall Street, the common things that come. How would you describe what a salesperson is now then? If it's so different to that, how would you describe it?
I think I've said this before, and like this industry, and we don't talk about it a lot at all. I don't think it's put in the limelight. Is camaraderie and kind of one for all, like a musketeer kind of thing. It's like everyone kind of understands. Like once anyone says, whoever else works in sales, and you say I work in sales, they instantly are like, yeah, I get it. I know what you're going through. You almost build. You automatically build this rapport with them. And I think that is the biggest thing I would say is the camaraderie side of it, that no one, and the support as well. Like the amount of support you get in this industry is ridiculous. Like I could reach out to anyone random that I've connected with on LinkedIn who's in sales and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this, I just need a couple of tips. And they'll be like, oh, I've done this, this and this, because everyone here has learned something and they're willing to share it. And I think a lot of people don't say that, don't talk about the kind of camaraderie within sales and kind of the empathy that everyone has automatically within this industry.
Fantastic. And I think actually that really reflects with some other guests actually that we've had on the podcast regarding, people and mentors on LinkedIn. You can reach out to anyone. It is almost a collaboration with everyone in sales because, as you said there, everyone's going through similar things. So yeah, absolutely. So I think salespeople are very collaborative in that sense. Brilliant. And I suppose then now just to move on to touching on, I suppose, your journey in sales, because as you said, you've been in sales for a while now. You've obviously seen incredible success in your career, and it'd be great to touch on, I suppose, how you've done that. And obviously being a global SDR manager right now from where you started in sales. Out of interest, though, a very broad question, but why was it, or why did you want to get into management in the first place?
I think for me, management was just kind of what I enjoyed about my role. So I used like what we used to call like internal buddies, and you start with a buddy, and I was always the buddy when someone started new. I helped coach them and take them through the processes and all the workflows. I loved processes and being like, you have to do it this way, and like this is why you have to do it this way, and this is what makes you successful. And I think for me, that was what the joy was seeing someone be like teaching them something and then them excel at it. And I kind of didn't really know if I wanted to be a manager, but I knew I wanted to be some like a coach or something like that. And I spoke to my manager at the time, and I was like, an AE position was there. It is there. That's kind of the kind of the normal pathway. There was no pathway built for an SDR manager. So I was like, what is it? What do you do? I kind of queried it quite a lot with my manager. I was like, that's what I like. I want to be able to, and I use her line all the time at the moment, which is, I want to get, in the nicest possible way, get you off my team as quick as possible, because it means that you're progressing. And that's like a motto that I live by, because yeah, and that's why I got into kind of manage. I was like so excited to like train someone up, to coach them, and then see them succeed. And I think that's what kind of led me to be like, yeah, I think management could be quite cool for me. Instead of like being an individual contributor, having to manage a team really excites me.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously you mentioned then that you approached your manager, actually, the typical route of going to perhaps the AE route, and it wasn't really for you in that sense in terms of your motivations. I suppose then for people listening, actually, how important do you think it is to know your career goals, or to know what you want to get out of your career from the outset of it?
I think it's super important. I think it's, having an overarching goal of where you want to end up. You might not know what that looks like today. It might take you 2, 3 years to get there, but having that goal gives you direction and focus, right? And then also you can articulate that to your managers or to leaders within your company or your industry to be like, I need support and help. Because as I've done it, so this is how I know. How I know is that, because when you articulate to someone in a managerial role, you have to be like, this is where I want to get to. How do I get there? Right. And every manager wants someone to do that, because it takes the fuss out of it. It's like, okay, this person really wants to do it. They're ambitious, and they're going to be willing to want to support that.
Sure. So actually articulating your goals, sharing your goals as well is really important, because yeah, as you said there, your managers are there to help you along that journey and support you. So it's important that you can talk about it. And I suppose then on kind of the other side of things, can you change your goals as time goes on, really, even after you've perhaps articulated them to a manager?
100%. I think, you should be able to kind of, there's not one path that, is a straight path. And sometimes there's interlocking and interweaving things, right? You might go halfway down the management path and be like, oh, actually, I really like CS or onboarding clients, for example, right? Or like account management and growing, because that's the same kind of skill set, but then you just change, right? And I think it's so important that it's not a linear pathway. Like some people like myself, I know what I wanted, and it was just a straight path for me. Other people may need to kind of, they come to a fork in the road, and then they're like, oh, I want to kind of explore that. I think it's important for you to be able to explore that, and you should explore it if there is interest. And this is the only industry that you can do that in all honesty, because there's so much you could go into.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's so broad, and yeah, as you said, there's so much variety in sales, and in terms of what you want to go into. And I suppose then for some people, I can imagine a lot of people starting out in sales, they might be doing the role for months or even a year, and just not have an idea of what they want to do. They might not 100% know this is what I really want to do. What advice, I suppose, could you give to them to help them, I suppose, figure out their goals or figure out what's important to them moving forward?
I think for me, like, Exactly. Like, I've been there, right? You don't know. I didn't know this industry. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, let alone sales, or management. And I think it's really understanding what you enjoy about the role is so important. So I really enjoyed, coaching and onboarding, as I said. What is it about the role that really kind of gets you up in the morning? Is it just cold calling? Is it getting paid and getting your numbers on the board? Is it like the process side of things? Because I know people that have gone into like enablement, for example, because they love, kind of going in and looking at the processes and breaking them down. So it's, what do you enjoy about the role? Why are you here today? And it doesn't have to be like numbers driven, because sometimes I feel like, specifically in sales, people get hung up on the numbers side of things and not the kind of other side of the coin, which is like the communication aspect. And and they're like, yeah, I really like to communicate with people. Well, what does that mean? I think it's breaking it down into both sides of the coin. What do you really enjoy about the role, both on a numbers standpoint, if that's what you enjoy, but also on the people side of things? I've known people to go into marketing, for example, and in events, because they just enjoy, speaking to people and organizing things. I know people that have gone into like office management, which is really far removed from sales, because they love organizing and organization and being able to like contact suppliers, etc. Because they had the cold call experience of getting through, they were more likely than any other office manager that we hired, for example.
Great. So it's important to understand what you actually like, and you can sort of tailor, I suppose, your career goals around that in that sense. And I suppose then to focus on you and your journey, because as we said before, you've had an incredible journey, and now being a global SDR manager. I suppose, again, quite a broad question, but what's it actually like being a global SDR manager?
I think it's challenging in a good way, like not in a bad way at all. I really enjoy the role that I do. It's on a day to day, I'm back to back in meetings. There's always meetings in my calendar. But one thing that I love is that I collaborate with so many different teams within the business. And from an SDR, when I was an SDR, I didn't really realize how many teams our actual like workload touches and who it kind of goes into and who do we collaborate with. Now being an SDR manager, I like work with marketing, I work with RevOps, I work with like finance. Like I literally touch every single part of the business. And I was like, I didn't really have that visibility. And it's super cool because you're like, wow, like this role, this being an SDR manager, like we actually touch quite a lot of different teams without my team actually knowing it. Like I have to do a lot of the kind of communication and talking to people and putting processes in place that sometimes don't also benefit my team, but they're like, wow, that process works for the SDR team. Maybe we should think about doing that. And then people come and talk to us. So I think, I think it's an amazing, rewarding kind of role that I'm doing at the moment.
Nice. And I suppose the first thing you mentioned, though, was that the first word actually you said after I asked that question was challenging. What kinds of challenges does global management pose to you, actually?
Global challenges for me are, I've got a team in the UK at the moment. I've got a team in the US. I'm growing a team in EMEA and then APAC. I think it's, first of all, time zones, and being able to give my team the most of my time. And so, managing a team in the US at the moment, luckily they're on the East Coast, so they're not too far behind us, and I can have a couple of hours where I can coach and speak to them. But again, like for majority of their day, I'm not there, right? And that's a challenge for them. I almost need kind of self-starters and people that are able to just kind of go and get on with the day. Whereas my team in the UK, they know that they have me for the whole day, like if they wanted to message me, and the same goes for everyone else. So I think for me, it's a challenge on a coaching perspective and an onboarding perspective. And also a recruitment perspective as well, because and I think we've come so far from kind of having a in-person office space, people working from home, etc. So I think, also another challenge is getting that team together and having the same camaraderie that I used to have on a sales floor. The same that kind of energy that people bounce off of is really hard to kind of recreate that online. And I have like things that I've tried, but that's one of the things that I think is the most challenging, is to like recreate that buzz, during like a call blitz or a call hour, that buzz that I used to really enjoy and thrive off.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing with everything moving online, actually, people working remotely, it is all about trying to recreate office spaces, keep the camaraderie, as you're saying there. Out of interest, actually, because it might be quite useful to people wanting to know then, what kinds of things have you tried to help recreate the buzz or keep the camaraderie or the team together online?
So I think my team are quite good at doing this on their own as well. I think they've bonded quite well. But they do like team drinks, for example. So they do a team drink / coffee every other week. Like they have welcome drinks / welcome coffee with the US guys on a Zoom, for instance. I've also done, we now do power hours, which are online, water cooler sessions I've done in the past, where it's literally like 15-20 minutes, where I used to put it in my team's calendar for them to just vent and moan, like literally halfway through the day, which is what you would do in the office, right? Like I think it's just like kind of replacing that, because you would, like, you get off a really bad call, you're sitting next to someone, the first thing to do is vent to that person and be like, this was a rubbish call, like, oh my god, I need to go outside, I need to, like, can you relieve this person, they hung up on me, like that kind of venting I think really helped. So yeah, I didn't attend them, because also I was like, they might want to moan about me, and me being there is not going to really help. So I kind of put it in the calendar and then never attended. I was like, it's for you guys to moan. If you guys want to moan about me, go ahead. Like I'm not going to sit there and be like eagle eye watching you. So they were able to moan about me, about a calling session potentially, and then doing online power hours, super helpful. Like on a Zoom, on a Google Meet, everyone kind of joins and meets, and it's very similar to doing a call, and like people can like do a breakout room if they want to vent, which is what you do. And then we do like competitions during that time. So I think it's yeah, being really creative. And then I've also done like escape rooms, like free escape rooms online, put the team into 2 breakout rooms, one person shares their screen, and it's a race to the end. So things that we would have done in person is kind of like doing online and just being really creative with it. And yeah, there's so much tools out there. Like I use this teaching tool for like objection handling wheel, which is like we just do that on a Wednesday as fun. So I'll be like hot potato it round, be like spin the wheel, and we'll spin the wheel, and then someone has to just deal with that objection, for example. So there's loads that you can do online that you might not even be able to do like I can't bring in a wheel, do you know what I mean, in person, let's go guys, every single week, but I can do it online. So I think there's definitely some advantages, and it's about being creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about almost recreating what you would do in the office and just putting it online really. As you said, like the water cooler sessions, I find that really interesting because you would just talk to the person next to you if you were actually on a sales floor, but when you're online, you're almost come off a call and then it's just silence. So I think it's important, to make an effort, especially when working remotely, to recreate these kind of just normal everyday like scenarios that would genuinely happen. But perfect. And obviously, I suppose then to touch on kind of similar to what Carl talked about before, your journey's obviously been incredible, and you've obviously with the challenges that the global aspect of being an SDR manager can pose, you've obviously been able to overcome them. Touching then on, I suppose, a really big topic that I know that you are extremely passionate about is, I suppose, then linking to the perception of sales really, but it's, I suppose, women in sales and the industry. And I know that we talked about specifically, actually, I think it was your dad's perception of it being a lads club and potentially, maybe it being harder for a girl or a woman to come into the industry in itself then. I suppose then from your perspective really, being a successful female leader, how has maybe this perception of a lads club or maybe sales in general affected your journey in sales at all, being a woman?
I think I mean, that perception definitely, I didn't voice it at the time, but it was definitely something of a worry. But when I came into it, I think I wasn't gonna very, very loud, first of all, and very kind of like matter of fact sometimes. But I think for me it was just like I just need to be brave, because there are other girls that might need help speaking up. I had a really good team when I first started. Like it's so important, like when you have that collaborative team, and that's what I talk about a lot. I had a lot of we had a majority of guys on the team, but instead of, I'd be like, okay, this is the idea that I have, etc. They would push me forward to be like, okay, go speak up, like, and being an ally to someone like me who is, maybe the minority in most situations, having people to kind of be behind me and push me forward, and give me a platform to kind of voice is super important. And I had really good sales leaders as well to be able to, give me that platform as well, to be able to be like, actually, that's a really good idea, let's try that out. It wasn't the typical kind of, I say something and then a guy says the exact same thing and they're like, oh my god, great idea, and it's like, well, I said that 2 minutes ago. So I think it's about also people within that room and people within that floor giving the individuals like women in sales the kind of platform to speak up and to also give them credit where credit's due.
Sure. So it's important, I suppose, for everyone then to encourage diversity and inclusion, to I suppose help people out in every kind of situation. And it all goes back to, I suppose, that collaboration aspect of sales, and it's so important to have that camaraderie there. And I think one, I suppose, big thing, I think I did a post recently on LinkedIn about women making up just 26% of sales leadership roles, which is obviously crazy given the industry changing quite a lot. I mean, why do you personally think women might be put off going into sales, or I suppose progressing in the industry?
I think it's definitely to do with that perception and kind of pushing back on the status quo. There is a status quo at the moment that, this is what sales is, this is why this podcast is so important, and changing that perception within the industry. Because I know a lot of, senior leadership and I was very lucky to have a role model who was a woman, and some of the candidates that we attracted was because there were two women in leadership, middle management and senior leadership, and that was the only interview that they had where there were two women on the call. It was like the only one that they had. Every other call that they had was a man, and they were like, I'm also a woman. And to be able to see someone being in a position where, it's management and senior leadership is super empowering. So that was one of the deciding factors for them to come to join our company as opposed to another company. So it's almost like, if they made it, I can make it, that kind of mentality. And I think it's super important that we're just really open and honest and talk about it, because I think that's also something, it's kind of there but no one kind of touches it. I think it's important that we talk about it and we express it, because I do believe that this industry is making massive strides. There's definitely more to do, but we are making massive strides in the right directions of putting people like myself in management roles, in senior management roles, to kind of speak out and be like, this is my journey, and giving them a platform to speak.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, as you said there, even the impact it's having on people interviewing with you and on your recruitment processes, with more women coming into the industry, seeing strong female leaders, they'll obviously be a lot more encouraged to believe, that, the industry or I suppose the perception of that industry that we previously had might not be the case anymore, and things can continue to change. So I think having, strong female leaders is really, really important. And you mentioned actually that you obviously had a manager who was a woman as well, which massively helped you, massively was an impact, I suppose. And yeah, how has that impacted your journey, or influenced your journey, I suppose, in sales?
I think for me it was, it was like really curious as to how she got there, because again, when she did it, the industry wasn't the same, right? So I was like, how did she do it? What did she do? And she definitely broke down some walls, and the coaching aspect from her, I could never ever take any credit away from her, because she did a lot of coaching with me. She gave me some tough love at times, and I think it made me a better salesperson but also a better manager. And having someone that is in a position where she's like, I've been there, I've done it, especially from a female role model and a female person that's gone through the struggles that I potentially am going through, someone that has mirrored my journey almost. I'm like, whoa, okay, and when she's giving me advice about, okay, do X, Y, and Z, it's not a patriarchal, like, I'm telling you to do this, so do it. It's kind of like, no, I'm coming from experience. Like, I've done it that way, I've tried it that way, try it a different way. Why? And it was just this kind of coaching technique that she used with me specifically, which was a lot of tough love. And I don't know if I would have responded in the same way, because like I said, I was a rebel and I was always like pushing back. I don't know if I would have received the same kind of like the way that I received that feedback and like took a step back to actually understand it. I don't know whether I would have done that if I had a male manager. I mean, I've had one and he's amazing and he was also really good. But I think if I hadn't had her first, I don't think my perception would have been really different. Because already coming into this industry, I have a perception that it's male environment and I'm going to be subbed out because I'm a female in this environment. So coming into it, I would have probably been a lot kind of stronger and probably pushed back a lot more. But I think having her first was like incredible, because I was like, she's like, I'm not telling you to do this because I have some vendetta against you. Like, we're in this together. Like, you know, and I think having her as a massive role model was hugely helpful to my career.
Absolutely. And on that then, I mean, when, if ever, or what, if any, challenges have you actually faced when progressing in the industry as a woman?
I think I've talked about this before, and I did talk about it in some other stuff. It's like, there is definitely some more that industry needs to do, but it's almost like I've now got a seat at the table. It's taken me a long time and a lot of pushing to get a seat at the table. And now it's up to the individuals that are surrounded in that table, because most of the time there are just men at this senior leadership level. I think it's the same thing. It's about being an ally, right? I've fought hard and I've fought to get this seat here. I think we just need to make sure that we are at a senior level also giving people. I've fought hard, I've earned my seat, I've earned my right to be here. Now that I've got the seat at the table, let me continue doing the great work that got me here.
Sure. So yeah, it's I suppose as the industry's responsibility, it's the people around you that need to, I suppose, help you keep that seat, support you in that really, and yeah, do their bit as well to keep encouraging this change that we're obviously on. And I suppose then the big final question just of this segment is, why should women get into sales?
It's super rewarding. Like, it's super rewarding. Like, I'm one of 3 girls. I'm the oldest, and if either of my sisters told me tomorrow, one of them's actually in sales, slightly different sales, but she followed kind of in my footsteps, which is quite funny. She was like, oh my god, when I was going into it, and now she does sales herself. So, and probably my youngest sister will probably come in this. And so for me, I think, women coming into this industry, we need more women, we need more voices. We need to be the change that we want to see as well. And I think it's just, the industry benefits so much from women being within this industry. Like, it's better, it's more collaborative. Like, there are actual studies of women coming into this, but it's super successful. Like, you'll learn the most in this role, but it's also, there's great progression, and there's also support here. It's not as scary as it used to be.
Nice. I really appreciate your insight there. But yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening will take that away. But obviously, I know we could talk about this topic for hours probably, but just conscious of time coming up towards the end really of the podcast. So just, I suppose, just a couple concluding questions really that I think would really help the listeners moving forward. One of them is a bit of a broad one actually. But what's one book or maybe podcast that you would recommend people in sales or people looking to get into sales should listen to or read?
For me, it was the thing that changed the way I sell is Never Split the Difference. I think that it's a book that goes around quite a lot, but I think for me, reading is like a massive issue, because I just can't I can't keep my attention when I read. And it's just like, if something doesn't capture me in like the first 2 pages, I just kind of turn it off. But Never Split the Difference for me was like life changing, because it's like about this FBI negotiator, and I was like, oh my god, I'm on this, like, and I love it. And it's something that helped me, like, because I'm not a very good arguer either. So I'm rubbish at arguing. So I think it made me feel better about that as well. And about like kind of how to go into a situation and kind of unpick it. And it's something that I use in my day-to-day life as well. So I really, really highly recommend kind of Never Split the Difference. Because it's super, super really great book to read. So I think that would be my book that I would recommend. SDR podcast, this one, obviously. Someone to that they should definitely look at. I've also done the SDR Chronicles was something that I used to listen to when I was like starting out in the industry. It really helped kind of get me ramped up a lot quicker because it just gave me that industry knowledge that I might have needed kind of a couple of months, years to be in to kind of get exposure to, but I was able to get that from that podcast.
Great. So a couple of good recommendations there, and absolutely Never Split the Difference. I think it's fantastic. The way he tells it like a story with so many lessons to learn is great. And I suppose the final one then, the big golden question, what needs to be done to change the perception of sales?
I think this is the first step, right? It's like a podcast like this where it's getting leaders within it, SDRs to speak about it. I think it's also just us taking ownership of this industry because we're all in it, right? We're all working in it. We know what it's like. It's spreading that and talking to people about it. Like my sister, for example, is in this industry because I spoke about how amazing this industry is and how much progression I've got through it and how much coaching and experience I've gained in a couple of years. And she then was like, oh, that might be a good one for me to explore. And I think it's, there's an onus in all of us to kind of go out there and kind of spread the word and talk to each other.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Avi, for joining us on the podcast.
No worries at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. Please subscribe and follow for more. If you like this content, also please check out This Is Prime on all our social media channels, and also Kyle Gallagher and Lizzie Formisano on LinkedIn. See you next time.